Got some happiness coming from Compass today. We're continuing marching through Georgia, but if you remember, I played Prelude to Rebellion down there, and one of the dice was misprinted, and I went through a really troubling series of attempting to get. I mean, it's weird because they're carved dice, you know. I mean, they were stamped. One of them was just done completely weird wrong. But I got the replacement finally. But it was really a pain in the butt to get the replacement down. What happened was I contacted Compass, and they're like most of the companies out there, excellent with their customer service. I've had a number of issues recently where I needed to contact them. So far, except for this one, none of them were their fault. They were delivery or damage in transit type issues. But what ended up happening, this was like the third one I had that was an issue. I contacted them, they sent me it in a manila envelope, and it came with a little hole in it that was about the size of a die. Obviously, you know, the way the post office processes manila envelopes is going to pop it out. So I wrote that back, and I was a little afraid to say, you know, you really shouldn't send it in a manila envelope. I didn't want to seem like, you know, I was castigating or, you know, because it wasn't obvious initially, but I figured, you know, that it would be obvious. Don't send it the same way. There was an issue there. And the second one, and I mean, I didn't say much. I just said, it came, the envelope came with a die-size hole in it. And the response back was, I assume the die is not there. And I said, yeah, unfortunately it's not. But I didn't say the things I wanted to, which was, this is not the right way to send this. So he sent it out again. Bill Thomas, the president there, he handles all their customer stuff, which is all the customer service stuff, which, you know, is a sign of, they're a smaller operation, but, you know, I mean, that's really getting your hands dirty in terms of making sure that everything comes out right. And it's been fantastic because of that. But he sent it the same damn way, and it came the same damn way, the same die-size hole. So I contacted him back, but I had luckily just ordered their newest, like, space. I don't know quite what it is. I don't even remember what it's called. It is a huge box, really, really heavy. But I told them, just throw a die in there for it. That way it'll get there. And it was there right on top, perfect. And the die is correct. Like, it's hard for me to believe that there's a misprinted die. Like, I mean, I don't even know how, like, that kind of stamping, I don't know how it could happen, because what happened was you've got three that show up as a raised lettering on a black surface, and then three that are carved as a white surface. So instead of the O here, we had an EI like this. And it's like, I just don't know how but a number of dice must have gotten mangled one way or another. Who knows what the percentage is, but it's good to see that I finally got it. All right, on to start back into this. And with a heat event in play, the Union just pushes forward. They ran into a bunch of dummies here. There are no rebels dummies. No. And I don't know what this was associated with. I think somewhere over here, but I'll have to worry about it, whatever. And that'll give a chance for the Confederates to pull back. Basically, by force marching or whatever, they got themselves out of the way. So we got a little bit of time. The Union's not going to be sitting on the river, so they're not going to be able to cross it quickly, whatever I do. The Rebs keep falling back, kind of behind this river line. I got an entrenchment here. It's kind of a hoax. And otherwise, things that it's not absolutely clear what's going on, you know. But we push forward into the next turn, and that's about it. Confederate positioning has left the Union with a what the fuck moment, basically. There's a big pile of troops here. Are they real? Are they fake? I don't know. I only have all my cavalry stuck here. Now, I could scout that out, but I also kind of want to scout that out. I'm not sure which one to go for. This is vital, but maybe I just plow in there and see if, because if that's anything, it's probably Polk, but I can't be sure. You know, it could be something else. There's something real here that dug this, and something real that's still there, but I can't be sure. Turns out here it was just Confederate cav in that entrenchment and a bunch of dummies, and they pulled out. However, over here I ran into Hood, and we're going to have at least one round of battle there. Missionary attack versus a withdrawal. Oh, one key thing. I forgot my supply line here and ended up moving a supply wagon here, which I could have moved there. So I fixed that because otherwise I would have taken an out of supply penalty, which clearly I did not mean to do, you know, or would not have accepted. If I was thinking. Given the fact that I could correct it easily, no big deal at all. Had I not been able to correct it easily, let's say my supply wagons had gotten, as they're kind of going, too far away, I had better, you know, kind of think. And in fact, I had better not have that one there. I need both those supply wagons with the defense that I'm setting up. So yeah, I had to cheat a little bit there. But if I was thinking and planning my, you know, defensive line properly, that would not have happened as a problem. I hope that's it, not this one. Yeah, that's fine. And I actually have to be careful with this guy, like walking up here. Yeah, I did need to do that. He was fine here, but yeah, I don't know. I'm having a hard time keeping that supply part because that's a new little piece to the game. Anyway, both sides took one loss there, and now let me try to get the Confederates in line, and they're going to dig some more trenches and try to hold the river line here. And all dug in and feeling better, as we're now into, what, 7th of July already, with the U.S. not needing these markers anymore. And ready to push forward. And now we're behind that river line. Sure, the Union could try to push through here, and that could be a threat. That could force the Confederates to fall back, but that doesn't get me the rail line. That's the problem. Whatever I do here, then I'd have to shift and keep threatening, but this may not be a defensible line. Unlike where I was up here, up here, the rail line is so important, and I think it can be subverted little by little, either from that side or from this side, where, you know, the Confederates are going to have to draw a line that's not using the river, or they're going to have to draw a line over here across Kennesaw Mountain where they historically did. Time is the cost, though. You know, the longer it goes, the more likely I'm able to hold Atlanta for the whole game. And we've gotten quite a bonus in terms of the amount of time that we've been forcing the game to go on. The difficulty? Well, we had a nice advantage in victory points, and that's sort of faded away. Some of the actions against Polk have really gained the Union some grounds on the point table. And, you know, I mean, obviously that doesn't matter in terms of Atlanta in and of itself, but it's a sign that the Confederate Army, and you can take a look at it, is kind of running out of steam. Especially Hood, but, you know, Polk isn't that big to begin with. So then I'm left with Hardee, which, you know, maybe Hardee can hold Atlanta, but probably not against 3 Union armies. I think I pointed out a little earlier, it's hard to remember, you know, in my life. I think the Union has 2 choices. I mean, 3 really. I could just plow on ahead. Let's neglect that choice, because that way lies madness. It really does. It means lots of battles, and it means I will probably lose more trying to cross the river opposed into lousy terrain. So one option is coming down this way. 1, 2, 3. If I cover all this, I can degrade the line here. That doesn't get me to the railway right away, though. It becomes this kind of slower push through Kennesaw Mountain. I'm not really set up for that either. My supply wagons are over to this side of the railway. If instead I push here, I can go 1, 2, 3. I can launch an attack into here because of the supply there. Now that puts me near Sweet Mountain, and kind of in between with a pass. But I got to get the rail line, so I've got to kind of curve back and punch my way through. And here's the thing: as soon as I kind of reveal that, yeah, I'm not going to cross the river on one side, that'll allow the Confederates to strengthen that flank and make it more difficult for me to get it through. I'm not going to be able to keep going down here to Roswell or whatever, and likewise over here. If I make it to here, I've got to start cutting back down, you know? So my options become very limited, and the Confederates can push their forces to defend in a specific place or to fall back, you know? I mean, if I'm coming this way, there's a good incentive to just throw myself back towards the mountain and not try to defend an uncrossable burden here. And this actually looks more promising to me, but I'm set up to go this way, so that's what I'm going to do. It also gets me closer to the railways immediately, even though I have to punch through right away. Once I get to here, you know, so if I'm attacking into here from here, I still have to have my supply wagons all thrown across. But if I can get this space, now the world changes, you know. I've got more flexibility with my supply lines. So that's sort of the positive, but I still can't go pushing off into this way or running around this way, although I can use the cav to cause some disruption. And so this is what the Union setup is. I did a cav probe here and discovered that they blocked my cav probe basically, but there's something there. I can't just count on pushing through with no cost. Spread out elsewhere, no push against here. That's important. That's very important. Digging in here at Cassville, pushing over into here. Not sure what's going on from the Confederate point of view. One important place was this had to be covered. Why? Because if that's not covered, the Confederates could actually, assuming, well, they don't have enough supply wagons, but they could send cav or something up to disrupt things around Kingston. It's not worth a full corps attack going up there, but well, actually, yeah, I only have 2 supply wagons for the Confederates, so I could get a corps down to here, but I couldn't get one into here, which I don't remember the blockage rules for the supply line. That might not be as important as I thought. Anyway, over to the rebel side. By the way, the weather's fine this time. Rebs got all their dummies on the board again. So things look, you know, both sides kind of not knowing what they're doing, you know, what the other side's doing. And that's, to some extent, the beauty of this system. The hidden movement, the dummy counters, nothing too exciting there, but then the way that it actually plays out, I find it much more exciting than most of the hidden movement, you know, double blind dummies type games that I've seen. I feel like, you know, there's viable options in both directions. What do you want to do? As the defender, you have the harder choices usually, although who has the initiative, who's the defender, is sometimes in doubt. The Confederates, like I said, they could come smashing through here. What happens if they do? Well, I've got the rail line up to here, which means, you know, it's conceptually possible that I could cross here and then even force march into here if I have a strong enough force. But I've got to count that that's a Union army, you know. And the problem is I got to count that this, and this. That's 5 Union armies. There are only 3. Which ones are real? Which ones are partial? Which ones maybe are just non-existent? Well, I know that there's something where there's entrenchments. I don't know anything about where there's not. As soon as you entrench, you're telling the enemy, yeah, I'm here. And the same thing with the Confederates. I got 3 corps. Well, I got 3 entrenched locations. That's pretty damning, but not absolute. There could be a whole corps here, and I got one split up somewhere else, you know, and maybe I just shifted forces. You just don't know. The Union force over here scared Confederate cav back and away. And, maybe not all of them are able to withdraw. Nope, they're all cav. If there are infantry dummies there, they get thrown back, which doesn't do a whole hell of a lot. But so the Union knows it's crossed the river here. That's a powerful advantage. I can push forward here and here. This space is kind of interesting. It's almost useless. The only thing that there's a reason there's any troops in there is because there's, or any appearance of troops, is because there's an appearance of troops here. Okay, and for the Confederates, the interesting part, appearance-wise, is they're swinging something out here and out there. Now, those are probably cav, but this, if it's cav, is dangerous. I gotta get something to protect my Kingston and Woodland and whatever area. I can't leave this crossing open for them to slip back here. That makes maybe pulling back from here more important or whatever. So it's something to consider there. Elsewhere, well, this looks bigger now, and it is, but it's not apparent. There could be a lot of dummies there, and there are. But yeah, I mean, this is looking more dangerous. What about this here? Well, I'll just leave them there. They're not doing any harm. And that'll push the turnout to what, July? Middle of July. 13th of July, the Union pushes across the river and over here. And some shifting. I got to cover that. And you can see some, you know, like this is emptied out to give me that river crossing there. So we're just trying to turn that flank, get to the rail line. If we get there, the Confederates are screwed. They can't hold this line anymore. They got to fall back, probably to the mountains. I can point out, if I was playing with the standard rules that come with the game, the Union just has to succeed in fighting here and staying there. Which these guys, I think, are going to have to retreat. I'm not sure about the exact rules because these guys pushed in from this direction, but these guys forded. If these guys had been present already in the area, then the reinforcing bridgehead wouldn't have to retreat. But as it is, I'm launching attacks from two directions. I think that's how it goes. Again, that's just, you know, little complexities. That could actually be a problem because, no, as long as I don't have to fall back out of here, I'm okay. But yeah, that could mean I have less defense if the Confederates want to do a counterattack. Now, I'm not playing, if I was playing with the original rules though, that come with this, these Union forces, as long as they fight at least a round of battle, are free to just keep marching on the next turn. And they could, you know, press into here and then I launch another attack into there, or into here and cut the rail line, which really opens up the capability for the Confederates line to just collapse. That's the rules I used in Mississippi Fortress. Since then, I've been using the second edition rules, but the problem with this game is, which have a restriction where you can't just advance into anywhere if there's enough enemy force. The restriction, though, is there's a certain amount of force for each terrain type defined, and I don't have those because this is the first edition rules for this scenario. So I could use the ones from the old scenario, and that's more or less what I'm doing in my head. In order to say, yeah, I can't just go marching towards Atlanta no matter what. Now, obviously, the supply rules in this game restrict that anyway. But what do those matter if I can just punch right through and, you know, maybe get to here where I would be able to be made well, I would have to take this as well. But I would be able to gain supply fairly easily. The rules for this may actually be sufficient to prevent me from doing anything too egregious. However, again, if I got here, I would then be in supply in here. And I could easily do that. I have, you know, a couple of forces that can apply force on there. And those are actually real forces. Not quite sure why they're not, actually. Well, because I can't open this up. That's why not. With this system, I do regularly have to look up the rules. Like, what can I deploy in different wings on the battlefield? What are my restrictions based on the command and control rules for this? I don't know if they feel like they're a little more complicated. Kind of like in CDGs, the way bubble and area movement has interception rules and everything, that it create a lot of complexity. Feels like these are more complex rules than what's usually present in your hex and counter games. They don't take a lot more room to explain, but they're harder to remember. But that hard to remember may not be so much that they're actually more complex. It may just be that, I'm not used to that, right? This is a very different system. And again, like the SCS, the standard combat system, I barely have to read those rules. I barely ever have to look at them. I might have to look up one specific little, case point. But the fact that this is also, it's organized in what looks like a numbered case system, but it's not always very easy to find things in it. And again, Clash of Arms has a tendency to make kind of loosely written rules. This is in their older period. But even now, when I pull up some of their things like the Dresden rules, if you remember my nightmare with the Labatt series, that is apparently one of the very worst in terms of the rules quality. But yeah, Ed Wimble, who kind of runs COA, has a very loose feeling for nailing down rules, etc. But still, I have difficulty with the GMT rules often because many of the games are just different enough. So each CDG has like its own rules for interception and how you move things and all this kind of stuff that you got to kind of parse all over the place to find, as opposed to if I'm interested in movement and I'm looking at, an old hex and counter game, I know exactly where to look. It kind of doesn't matter what the game is. Even when I'm looking at really horrible rule sets like GDWs, I know where to look. Yaquinto, maybe that's going a little too far on the horrible side. You got sort of sandbagged here because this is the first core, not Hood's third core, or second core actually in this case, sitting here. And it's a little bigger. It's a little better shape. I ended up taking 3 losses over on the first round against the Army of the Ohio, and 1 loss against the Cumberland. That's in the first round of combat. Nothing was done to the Confederates. Their entrenchments were blown away for the round, but they'll be back for the next round. I don't think I want to launch another attack. Now, what that means is the Cumberland forces have to fall back. But now that I'm in place in here, I can bring them in and fight another round of battle because I've got the bridgehead situation and try to turn things that way. But this is not an easy fight. It's turning out. Well, if the first corps is here, does that mean the Army of Tennessee can be facing something else? Well, the problem with that is I've got parts of the Army of Cumberland, the Cumberland, maybe not here, but like spread through here, probably all here. And then I've got the Tennessee here, and I kind of can't risk doing much with either. So, for example, I can't move this into here. I could move the Cumberland into here. What is this? It's probably nothing. And then that tightens me up a little bit. I could get rid of this because it's not important if that happens. And, maybe I can make another press across the river because I'm guessing that the entrenched stuff is where his real units are. But right now, I don't think I want to continue this combat. And obviously, the Confederates, they could turn it and pursue me, but that's not in their favor. They just need to hold the line. And they feel pretty good about it, actually. And the Rebs did a little scouting here, found themselves something. It's bigger than they can handle. They were hoping maybe one of these little doinker units was there, and if so, maybe I could use some of this core, push through and make a real threat here and just change the whole nature of everything. Unfortunately, not really, because There's no crossing here. Or wait, there is! Oh, geez, I thought there was no crossing here. There's no crossing up here. That's the one where it's important. There is a crossing there, yeah. So yeah, I mean, if I could have probed across here, threatened this, that changes the whole nature of the Union line. It may have to spread out even more. And then, you know, maybe this corps comes forward and does something. Who knows? But as it stands right now, I feel like I'm defending along this line. I pulled back. Knowing this doesn't help one way or another. You know, this is the important one. I've got to be able to get reasonable ground troops into here to be able to hold it, because the Cav can just be chased away very quickly, and the Union can trace their supply from back here and have everything pretty much covered by that. The exception being whatever's back here. But given that there's real stuff back there, I can't make it through. If there wasn't real stuff back there, then the supply doesn't matter that much for that. And this becomes the important space or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, you can see the Confederates have gained some more victory points with the Union on the attack again in a place where they're not, you know, really advantaged. Like when they had the advantage in the numbers pushing through here or whatever, they were able to do a lot of damage. But now they're taking the damage instead. How much are they threatening, you know, the line here? Yeah, this becomes another attrition fight, you know. It's 1.5 corps versus one big solid corps. What else can I do to try to grind the Confederates down? Well, that's hard, because if I'm looking at crossing a river anywhere else, I don't have the support. This side would have probably been easier to do successfully. However, this terrain's a little bit less defensive, so who knows. We've got heat now. I'm really not thrilled about doing this again, but I don't see another answer to it. The other option would be to just hold off, leave the Union sitting here, maybe dig in, because the Confederates didn't attack. Just make sure that they don't push me out of there very easily, and wait until I can bring the rest of the Cumberland forward. Right now I'm shifting some things around, try to find out what's there, so that, well, I don't even know how much that helps me, because I got to get a unit here on the rail line to protect that. So the force that's here isn't going to be able to go over there and help with the rest, with Thomas's rest of his units. I was considering sending the Army of Tennessee in here, but I'm playing around with this to see, hey, you know, can I kind of scare the Confederates out of there maybe or something? I doubt it, but at least I'm probably preventing them from throwing more reinforcements here into, what is that, Gladeville. But I don't have a lot of hope of being able to break them there. That first corps is pretty potent, and I'm sending 1.5, well, more than that, but, you know, here's the thing. I'm sending more than half the Army of the Cumberland there, and the Army of Ohio, which is not very potent. It's basically a corps. So it adds up to about an army, but kind of my biggest army. Unfortunately, the Cumberland's been chewed up a lot, and the Tennessee's in better shape. McPherson's also my better attacking commander, so launching the attack from McPherson might make more sense. But I just don't want to do it, especially with these Cav kicking around there, which are now like that. With the Union already present here, I still have the fording penalty. Only did 1 round of combat again. 3 Union losses to no Confederate losses. Actually didn't even blow away the entrenchments this time. Not going a second round. Same reasons as last time. But now I get to keep the Cumberland units under Thomas there. Unfortunately, I matched up where Hardy, who's going to be kind of my bonus no matter what for the Confederates, was sitting directly opposite Thomas. Schofield doesn't have any capability to actually do damage to anyone. Yeah, this was just 2. 2, the combat intensity chart wasn't high enough to cause casualty checks, so that's not an issue. But the big deal now is the Army of the Cumberland Corps are able to stay here. And that means not having them anymore. So this force, which, you know, you can see the strength point totals here. These were both 1 to 2 attacks. Now I go up to 1 to 1, and maybe I want to launch, you know, something a little bit more intense and try to blow them away. But as it stands, I'm just taking casualties and not getting anywhere. I'm not able to push through. If I was playing with the basic rules, yes, I could. I could push right into here, and with an advance onto there, who knows what I could do, especially if I'm able to keep the Confederates from, you know, reaching these crossing points easily by pushing around with the cav or whatever. But as it stands, I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm getting the kind of purchase that I want on the Confederates to be able to knock them out of this space, and I don't have the focus to be able to launch the attack this way because I launched it that way. I don't know if it would go any better, you know. Yeah. And the rebels got a little bit of a coup here. They swept up here, found there was nothing there. I was expecting there to be some cav there, but I figured I'd take a probe anyway. Because I found that, I think I'm going to hold the line there because this is threatening things. It's going to force the Union to have to do something to protect their supplies here, because otherwise I can just ride in and do something nasty. So who knows what that means, right? You know, could mean I should be shifting this corps up to threaten the Union lines. Maybe I want to. I didn't move them. Yeah, you know, I'm going to take a little chance here. I'm going to push the line. See, the reason I don't want to take the chance is I feel like I got the Union pretty much stymied. And if that's the case, why take a risk and expose myself out here where I can't entrench? All right, let's take another roll. Make it a little less likely. Yeah, we're gonna just hold off where we are. See what the Union does. Maybe they chew themselves up so much here. They've been doing so far. They've taken 6 losses in over 2 turns. If they want to keep making that kind of trade, you know, with me taking nothing, pretty soon that line is just going to collapse, and maybe they'll launch an overall attack or something like that. So at the very least, they have to do something about this, and we'll see what that ends up being. Weather ends up clear. The Union covers this crossing. They've got this one covered with whatever's here. Not pushing there. Cumberland is moving its other portion in here after a scouting revealed there's no more than 1 Confederate unit there. It's probably a cav at best. So, and I didn't try to counter, so it's probably nothing. So I'm just taking my position along the river. That'll allow me to bring more Cumberland forces in there if I'm launching an attack across that way. But for the most part, it's just a positional thing. You know, if the Confederate line breaks, I can push through. This is where the fight is really still happening, and I don't have too much hope, but I do have these thoughts of if I can get these cav out of there. The Army of Tennessee could push forward across the river there. I'm probably facing something weak, you know. I mean, if it's Polk, he's shitty. No matter what, it's shitty. McPherson is better than either of the commanders, so he can match up against the commander and get a combat bonus. If it's Polk, it's doing nothing. If it's Hood, well, Hood's not that bad on defense. If he doesn't match up against McPherson, they each get a bonus, and that's not great. Coming into rough terrain on a river, that's not going to be pleasant, even against Polk. It's not something I really want to face. How much damage have I done to them? Well, you know, not enough. I'm going to get hurt coming in, so I'm kind of just hoping this breaks. But I just don't feel like I have any really good option right now. For whatever insane reason I had in mind, Thomas decided to assault. The reason was, honestly, I would get this up to here at the 1 to 2. Yeah, I take 2 losses. The Confederates take 1. if I went with anything lower, I could reduce the losses to neither on either side, but to get over the entrenchments, I have to do something kind of violent. Otherwise, you know, my one shot or whatever, even on this best table, which I'm not going to be on without the assault, unless I get lucky on the leadership, but I did not, is going to, you know, at most cause them one casualty. And chances are they're just going to be burning through mine. So it seemed like the thing to do. Well, it didn't turn out to be. I took 5 losses to their 0 between the two armies, and I could go another round. What's the value to going another round? It's not very good. I just don't feel like I can win on this fight. My army's just melting away. And yeah, I got an extra strength point in it, but there comes a point where it just doesn't make sense to keep fighting along the line. And maybe I just want to park there, make sure I'm holding down their powerful First Corps, and see if the Army of Tennessee can clear a hole next turn. Because right now, it just doesn't look like I'm getting there. Confederates probed across the river. This isn't great. I can pull back. That's not hard. Now, the Union could say, well, no, I'm intercepting you, but then they become the attacker. They take away all the defensive advantages they have. And I do feel like I'm kind of holding the line. So, you know, I think I am just going to pull back and try to hold the line that I have right now. The one problem that I have is this supply wagon isn't very well defended. If something comes along this way, if it's not Cav, it can hurt me. If it's Cav, the Cav unit there pretty much defended. I don't think they're going to be able to get real corps moving down this way without ending up out of supply, and maintain the supply line that they have here. If I do a quick count of their supply trains, basically they'll be using 2 to get this in supply, and then that means that they've got maybe 1 here, so they could get here, but they can't get here. They would have to have a second supply wagon here to get a corps there. So this Cav should be able to defend this against anything the Union can throw in that direction, which means the Union will have to launch its attack this way, and that would open up the possibility of the Cav screwing around with the rail line there. So the Union's going to take a pause here, and I lose my little combat counter, but I'm going to gain 1 here. This one's not there anymore, because I'm launching the Army of Tennessee in against that, see what I can get. If the Confederates had diverted someone here, they would be in a much worse condition. But right now, well, we'll see how it works. However, McPherson's a better leader. Now, if I was playing by the first edition rules, he could easily just push his way through. Because he's going to be allowed to stay there after the river crossing. But again, that's not the way this game works. However, I got me a problem. Yes, I do. Okay. We gotta make sure. Oh no, I don't. No, I don't, because I'm gonna be next to the rail line, so I'm fine. It's conceivable that the rail line could get cut there. When do I get charged for having my supply cut? Because I don't have anything here. I can't afford to have the setup I have, but luckily for me, I could get these here and actually have a setup that looks kind of like this, which protects everything. So this isn't perfect, and it's a pity I didn't dig in there, but I can hold the line here, and I should be fine. Okay, so a diversionary attack with the fording, but yeah, it's not good. I'm at 1 to 2. I end up taking a total of 2 casualties. Did nothing to the Confederates, didn't even blow away their entrenchment temporarily, whatever. Not good, but here's the thing. I'm in here now because I have a superior leader, so I don't have to fall back across the river. And that might put the Confederates in a tricky position where Polk may not be able to hold this against McPherson. We'll see. To Major, the rebels just pulled back their cav. They're not able to deal with what they've got there. They don't think they got to cover the retreat if it happens. So, yeah, better safe than sorry, right? Because I got a supply wagon here that I need to keep it to stay in the space because there's no crossing here. This is my crossing. So, yeah. One of the problems by being in this static line, unless I send somebody back to start digging me trench lines over in Kennesaw Mountain, I'm not going to have that good a defense line there. There's some reason to dispatch forces. Maybe I'll do that. I may have somebody over here from Hood that I can do, that I can afford to send up there. He's got some pretty chewed up units. About to call it a night, but the one thing I'm noticing with this campaign and with the Lee Takes Command one, both of them felt like big what ifs. Mississippi Fortress, not so much, but both of these feel like they're not so much. Hey, here's a situation where the players are going to play out and it's going to come out historically, but rather something where you have the chance to tinker with what was inherently viewed as the losing side's defense or operations and give yourself a shot at winning the game or the campaign even by doing significantly better. Here we can see the Confederates held the line that the designer sees as where they should have held quite a bit longer, and now they're holding here better. And in Lee Takes Command, what we saw was, again, the designer had a kind of concept that McClellan's actual ideal wasn't that horrible, and if he undertook it a little bit better, maybe something good could happen. Now, there, I may have screwed up by pulling Jackson across the river. I don't know what the river's called. I think the Chickahominy, but he pulled across the river and ended up in a big trench war line, which takes away his striking power of knocking the Union off the north. But in both cases, what we saw were significantly different campaigns kind of developing because of some of the choices that were made. Here, very clearly, it seems to me, Johnson, there's the idea that, like, he let a number of opportunities pass where, well, he basically chickened out or let his commanders chicken out for him, and fell back. And the thing is, you just do not want Hood in command. Hood is just the worst person you can possibly put in charge of an army on a defensive situation, especially. And it's really hard to tell whether or not he would have been effective in attack. Like, I know in the Victory Games Civil War game, they give him pretty good attack ratings, and, well, not horrible ones. And basically his initiative, his willingness to do stuff is so high that he's actually not a completely ineffective army commander. The problem is he's causes penalties, and he's such a good corps commander that you don't want to have him become your army commander. Yeah, you got Van Dorn. He's a Van Dorn basically, impetuous, lousy in commanding the army, but that can be really useful. He's not useful here. He's just bad as an army commander here because he's got a bunch of rules to make him, start being too aggressive across the board. But yeah, that what-if nature, I don't know how much that is bothersome. To me it's kind of like, yeah, okay, so I'm seeing the designers pointing out the flaws that certain commanders did during the campaign, and that's interesting. But on the other hand, I kind of like some scripting to make sure that those flaws happen, and I've mentioned that before in this one. It feels kind of like Johnston is able to do too good a job. Now, maybe it's the fact that I'm not Sherman, and or maybe because I'm playing solo and I'm not able to fool myself as much. Although I use some dice to try to do that. We'll see. We'll see how McPherson fares here, though. He's made his way across. If he can batter his way through, that's fine. It just doesn't feel like I can degrade the Confederate position to the extent where they keep feeling like Johnston did, that they have to fall back. But you know, maybe the combat here will make that look a lot worse. 2-round combat here at Stilesboro, and we've got 2 wings for the Union hitting the Confederates, and crap, I screwed up and caused too much damage. No, I did not, because I rolled no hit there and no hit there. Good enough. Okay. I rolled dice for the Confederates when I shouldn't have, because they can only fire at one of the wings. But anyway, the results here were 3, 6, 8 losses for the Union, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the Confederates. Not so bad compared to what I've been seeing. We went to assaults, which actually works out a little better because I can trim away the strength of the fortifications more quickly. And we did advances first and then the assaults. And what we're seeing is the Confederate forces are beginning to melt away. They're not going to be able to stand there forever. And how much damage is being done to the Union? Well, that's a good question. Is it enough? Can I afford? See, here's the problem. This space is just, I think, defensible terrain, because it's not this very green with brown in it. It's patches of green with little tiny browns in it. Right? Yeah. So holding this space is not going to be easy, and I need that space if I'm going to hold here. So then the whole thing becomes, do I fall back, you know, to Kennesaw Mountain? If I do, what do I do here? A whole bunch of questions there, but I cannot stand this forever. Can I stand it a little longer? Could I swap? There's no easy crossing, so it's not easy to swap forces out of there. So I got kind of a problem. But on the other hand, I can't force march up to the Kennesaw Mountain area, in this case Pine Mountain. And if I just fall back here, the Union just keeps pushing forward. So it's kind of a troublesome situation that I don't have any easy way out of right now. I'm not sure what the Rebs are going to do. Whether they're going to hold out a little longer until Polk is completely worn out, or if I need to fall back now. One of the cool things about the game, what I actually did was I used Cav to screen here, leaving them in the entrenchment for whatever reason, because that helps make things more confusing, and pull back here. But that's not obvious to the Union. To the Union, this could still be Polk here, sitting here, ready to fight again. Does that matter much? No, not really. The Cav's going to screen him, it's going to fall back. He doesn't have Cav to beat it up definitely on the line. He could throw more in, whatever. But then it ends up being a Cav interception battle, which is probably pretty good, being, you know, I think I'd lose the entrenchments, but I'd still be in the rough terrain. And otherwise, I'm moving back, giving up the line. And as you can see, I'm entrenching here, which is going to allow a slower, better progression backwards. Do I want to throw somebody back into here? That's a good question. To start building an entrenchment there. Well, the real problem with that is it sufficient? And the reason it's not is because if I move back here, then Roswell is open and the line to the river is there. So I've got to hold this location still. And of course, the problem with that is it's exposed. The Union can get more of Cumberland in there without too much risk. So I don't think I can hold the mountain. The mountain's not good. Because I would need to sit at Roswell. And then this river line becomes really ugly. And it kind of becomes, I can't hold that. And I've got to fall back to Atlanta. And there's enough game left. The Union should be able to pound their way in there, probably. So that's problematic. I'm going to have to look at the hood rules, see how he interacts with Atlanta. I believe he's allowed to defend in Atlanta itself without his special penalties, which means I just give up the river line, fall back to Atlanta, take that defensive place, and let the Union batter it and see what happens. I guess. I'm not sure. Because there's the supply lines that I might have to still maintain. I don't think Atlanta itself is a supply source. A lot of interesting little stuff I gotta look up. So let's see. 111, 125, 127, 111, 125, and 127 are back here. So Atlanta itself is not sufficient. I have to hold a better line than that. I think the Confederate line is just falling apart at this point. There is essentially no way that I can hold it. Unless I can hold this space against all comers. Which might mean, so here's the thing. The Union doesn't have the rail line. By falling back, I'm making it so that it's going to be hard to get that kind of pressure that I need from here. And that may mean the Union has to disengage here in order to continue pushing, just because of the way the supply lines work. Or, yeah, I mean, this space was not that important. Interesting. What I don't like about this particular incarnation of the system is it's very possible because of the supply rules, and it may just be an unfamiliarity with them. I had a Union cav here. It can disengage. The Confederates, I don't believe, have a cav. If they do, they want to stop it. I could move here, here, and then force march into here. And that would actually cut the Confederate supply line, and I believe, it's hard to tell, because there's no sequence of play here. Let me see if the base game handles it. There's a victory point stage. Is it in the other player's turn? Yeah, it's in the other player's turn. So, okay. So, the way this is worded, I hate this. The Union gets victory points at the end of the Confederate player's turn. So if the Confederate player is out of supply at the end of their turn, there's a problem. But I could degrade the entire Confederate supply. So this is not an unreasonable thing, but because I kind of clumsied around and didn't realize that threat, I'm just going to move the Union to here rather than try to cut off their entire position with the cavalry there. But in a real game, I could do that, and I would have just degraded their entire position. Now, how big a deal is that? Maybe not that much, because the Union can then be scared off by committing some forces in the area. It's not like you can cut those rail lines really trivially. But this is also threatening coming down here and really cutting their supply line. And so I have to deal with that cav. So it's not that big a deal in terms of whether the Union force marches. And force marching with cav, you don't get a lot of cav back. I don't know. I don't like doing it because they're small enough to begin with. But yeah, I mean, the losses aren't real losses. They're still stragglers, and they come back easily enough. But anyway, let me make sure that I could get out of there without being intercepted. Not. So there's actually going to be a Confederate combat here. Some Confederate cav was present in that stack and prevented the Union cav from getting out. So there's that. That I got the Army of the Tennessee that's going to be fighting here. I'm going to have the Confederates have to fight at least one round of battle there because they declared the interception. And I guess the only other really exciting thing is the Union is throwing some cavalry on the side here. I'm really threatening this position. I don't think the Confederates can stay there under the pressure that they're in. But yeah, and that's not good, but whatever. But I forgot. This is what's kind of nice about going to bed in between, is that I had already pulled out of here. All I had was a cav there. That stack looked like it was real. But yeah, and it had an entrenchment on it, that's why. So they just pulled out. There was no cav to defend against them. And yeah, I've already started my Confederate withdrawal last turn. So over here, the Union lost, or the Confederates lost a cav attacking the Union. They were at poor odds. Nothing off the CIC. Confederates did a diversionary attack just to keep the Union from leaving, but and the Union did stand. That's not going to change anything, but that gave them a better table here. So we were looking at this table versus this table, and you know, the die rolls could have gone either way, but we ended up with a Confederate loss. The victory points is not the only thing that would happen from here, though. There's straggler checks that happen for being cut out of supply, which could have greatly weakened this force. And in fact, more than that. Because I cut this, I cut everything. So all the Confederate units would have had a straggler check. That would have, and basically had to fall back. That would have pretty much undermined their entire position. And that just shows this, the formation that I was sitting on was not that safe. There's a reason for Johnston to want to pull back constantly. He's not on his supply lines, and he's outnumbered, and it's not good. You know, this is not a campaign that he's going to come out with a major victory unless he manages to pull something like that on the Union. And I think I've been a little sloppy about protecting my supply lines and about chasing after them. My focus just hasn't been on that as well. You know, I'm thinking less in terms of what the cav can do on its raids. I know there was an optional rule that involves cavalry raids or something like that. Jeez, for this game, you don't need them because they can fuck up your supply lines pretty heavily. For some of the others, the supply doesn't exist that way. All you have is the overall, can I trace back to, you know, my commander, can I trace by roads and rails back to where I want, unless like in Lee takes command, there's the river line that can impact you, but it doesn't have the same impact. You're not going to start suffering stragglers by being out of command. Here though, Sherman is so far down his supply line, and maybe, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me there would be capabilities to requisition, but that probably is what the stragglers kind of might represent. So it's not like you're really suffering, it's just your army is spreading out because you don't have that consistent supply of food coming in. That's my guess. I kind of like the supply rules, but they might require an attention to detail that I can't do, either opposed or solo. And as we're entering August, well, it's July 31st, but this next turn goes into August. This is how the Confederates have pulled back. Some entrenchments here at Altoona Creek that I'm probably not going to hold, and really falling back on the Kennesaw Mountain, trying to protect the wings here. And you know, it's not going to be permanent what I'm sitting on. One of the biggest defects that I have is, what do I do about this? And I don't know the answer, to tell you the truth. This looks like it's going to be the hole that I'm going to have trouble coping with. Most of my Union forces, we got heat this time. That means really no forced marches. The cost is just too high. I don't think I'm going to do anything over here still. But, and we see the advance across, what the hell is this? The Iorawa River? with some interesting things like Pumpkin Vine Creek and Raccoon Creek. Great names. The Indian names, they're interesting, but they're hard for me to pronounce and hard to associate in my mind with anything, but those are just kind of cute. And well, let's leave this here too. I've got a bunch of cav and cav dummies, and what do I want to do with them for the Union? The big question is, do I want, I might try to break away with this cav too. Let's think about that for a moment. Do I want, where do I want to probe and at what strength? So if this is empty, or mostly so, a forced march into there would have been interesting. But I don't think that's terribly interesting right now. Like, the cav could probe, and I could have forced marched in and gained some ground. This starts putting pressure immediately on here, but the Army of Tennessee is having a hard time going forward, so I think I want to probe in here. How much do I want to probe with? I don't know. Let's throw 2 cav in there. And do the Confederates want to counter that with anything? If I expose 1 cav, I get them down to the crappy level, where only a 5 or 6 shows anything, including that top unit. Well, we get the 5, so I see that top unit. I know I've got real units there. Do I want to fight them or no? I don't know. Odd yes. I choose to back away. I can stay here, though, with these 2 cav that I exposed. We'll leave this one exposed. And I'm going to probe in here. Now here, the Confederates actually have nothing. So I'm rolling on the 4 table. And I exposed nothing. I'll stay up here too. And I'll move one of these here. And so that's what I'm going to leave for the rebels. And then I gotta let my wife have some food. Okay, so we finished up the Confederate side of the turn. Let me explain what's going on, because it's a little complicated, I think. First of all, obviously, I withdrew back into the mountain ranges. Some digging in going on. Here, I had to pull some guys out of here. This is using that Confederate special withdrawal rule. You don't have to move everybody out. You can just move a couple of units out, and they can't be dealt with in any way. They can basically withdraw without any problem, as long as it's towards Atlanta. This is a little funky and doesn't feel like, it feels like the system has some kind of core flaw with that. This is a little different from the full retreat rules, which it's almost like a compromise from them, where all your forces have to pull back that are in command. Well, here it's not even all the forces in an area, so it's like the system's got a few rough edges that don't quite work. Anyway, that's what's happened, and you can see I'm covering this. Now let me explain the weaknesses. The railway coming down through here, this area, I feel is relatively well protected. This area, this crossing used to be protected from infantry, but it's not anymore, because now I've had to give up. This is actually not, the area is not called Altoona Creek. That's this little creek here. The area is this Ackworth, I think. But the Union's going to be able to move up to here. They can have a supply wagon here. Here, they have 3 of them. Here, they can make the crossing. Is that terrible? I don't know. I could just cover this with cav. That would be sufficient, because I'm not going to get supplies any further than here without getting things up. Now, of course, if I was here, hold on. No, I could get here, here, and here, which means I could get infantry as far as here. But, wow, that degrades the river crossing and makes it almost impossible for me to hold the position. So I think I actually have to hold, say, this space across the river. But if I'm doing that, then I've opened up my front to include this space, and that becomes problematic. And then over here, now I have 3 corps. So I could actually hold this, this, and this. Is that sufficient? It is for a while. So I've got some cav or whatever holding the line here. That's not going to be enough to stop the Army of the Tennessee, though. Which I could run my supply wagons. I mean, conceivably, I could run them out of here. 1, 2, 3. And again, I'm right next to Atlanta, and I've undermined the mountain. So the mountain cannot hold for very long. And that means we're going to fall back, probably across the river. Hood's going to take command. It's just a matter of how long can I keep Hood from taking command? How long can I stay on this side of the Chattahoochee? And I've pushed it a lot further than historically was the case. With Hood in command, then things change significantly. And the one advantage I have, well, right now I've got a 13-point lead in victory points. That's not the 25 for Atlanta. I can't just leave the battlefield and say I caused enough damage I can give up Atlanta. But it might be enough with the costs of the river crossing and the costs of taking Atlanta that the Confederates can still claim some kind of victory out of this. But I could not hold any line forever, it turns out. The weakness here, which isn't a terrain weakness, but had to do with how my forces were dispositioned, and the fact that the Union managed to get the jump on me, coming down this way with a forced march, whatever, that hurt. And I could have defended against that. I could have set up better. So this line could have held presumably forever, but eventually the Union might guess right and plow into you. They came out of that pretty well, the Union did. They had a lot of, they had the victory points almost tied after battering their way through that. Battering their way through a weak spot, Polk's, a couple brigades, and then his division. Now, here, we're in another position where if the Union kind of guesses right, they may get a breakthrough. But they may not, you know? And the Confederates kind of know where the Union's dispositioned, and both sides have difficulty moving their forces out. The one thing, though, I definitely need to hold this space, this space, this space. This space is the hard one to hold. It's not good terrain. And because the Union's gotten across the river, once they get past this space, they now have lateral movement for their supply wagons and everything. So they're in pretty good shape. Right now I've got a problem because I didn't have this space yet, so I couldn't connect to here. So these guys were running off Cass Station, but as soon as this is taken, I'm in supply pushing forward, and I can put threats all along the Confederate line. So this was kind of a tricky terrain for the Union to get through, but they managed to do it now. All right, I'm going to send this one up because this seems like a good major section of the game has been completed in close to my hour, so I'll be back later.